So a little bit behind the scenes on how we select the subject matters for these episodes. The vehicles usually are either weird, intoxicating, or they appeal to our more prudent side. Then there's subjects like this. Frankly, this is all about the pageantry and the kind of folks that are going to write a check for something like this. They don't give a damn what someone like me has to say. So really, for you and I, this is all about entertainment. So with that, let's be entertained with one of the cars that is probably the most baller that we have driven all year. So let's get something out of the way right at the top. This is not like Maybachs from 20 years ago where they're made with frankincense and myrrh at the top of Schloss Hohenschwangau and transported to their final destination on the back of a cherub. Rather, this is an offshoot of a W223 S Class. That's why it looks the way it does, which means you are not going to be surprised to learn that that is a 4-liter twin turbocharged V8 that is good for 496 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. But like the W223 S Class, it is also a hybrid. No, not a parallel hybrid, it's a mild hybrid, which means it has an integrated starter generator motor that sits between the engine and the transmission. Now, why is that important? That forms the basis for a 48-volt mild hybrid system and really is the foundation of the electrical system throughout the car. So instead of having like a compressor and a generator or an alternator hanging off an accessory drive, it doesn't have an accessory drive causing drain to the engine. All of that is driven electrically from the integrated starter generator motor. So this has an electric air conditioner rather than something we've seen in more pedestrian luxury cars. Then what does that do in terms of performance? Well, it's not a parallel hybrid as we talked about, but it does add some assist under hard acceleration or in passing, specifically 21 horsepower, 184 pound-feet of torque. Now, in terms of fuel economy, does it improve something that you would think would be very bad? Not in the least. 16, 24, 19. Then there are the performance figures, and it's not as quick as a W223 S Class, which is surprisingly quick. 4.4 to 60. This is slower because it's longer and heavier, 4.7 to 60, so it's still not a slouch. And then there is the VMAX. Both are electronically limited to 130 miles an hour. Yes, you are correct. This, not lightweight. 5,247 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 2,380 kilograms. Now, the very important point about that, it is 500 pounds heavier than a box standard S580 S Class. With that, sport mode. Oh yeah, you definitely notice. Well, it comes alive at about 4,000 RPM. That's where you really notice it. But this, it's not about acceleration. This instead is much more about a leisurely pace. You do not want to push this thing beyond its limits because there's a lot of weight to throw around. And the combination of the mild hybrid system we just discussed in the hangar, the 9-speed transmission, torque converter transmission, and that extra weight, it definitely changes. You notice this car. You notice the extra weight. You notice it coming from the ass end of the car. But the thing is, it's not a slow car. Yeah, it is definitely designed for someone to drive you rather than what we're doing today. But overall, this is still, it feels like a quick car, and I would argue the biggest attribute that brings that along is the mild hybrid system. Then you and I need to discuss the driving dynamics, or really we should call this the riding dynamics, because again, you are going to be in the back seat of this car. And something that you just can't get around is the size of the vehicle, put aside the mass. This is a full 7 inches longer in wheelbase than a box standard S Class. It's all in the back doors. So that, what is 133-inch wheelbase and 215-inch length. So the length is also 7 inches longer. You absolutely feel it as you're pushing the car more aggressively. Again, this is not something you really want to push aggressively, but in this sport mode, I'm kind of surprised to share this with you. There is composure. Like, you're not going to go around these corners like an SL63 AMG. Now, if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, what they did is engineer more composure rather than compliance into this large vehicle. And the reason why they did that, that's the best way to counteract the extra weight as well as the extra length of the vehicle. Now, aiding in that is the structure underneath the vehicle. Multi-link in the front, multi-link in the rear, air ride at all 4 corners, and all of that is complemented with torsion bars both front and rear. And again, what this is trying to do is accomplish a good ride quality. Now, the only thing that may be working against the ride quality in this specific Maybach Sterling 1552 is the wheel choice. This is fitted with larger 21-inch wheels, and normally when there are larger wheels fitted to a vehicle, it kind of degrades the ride quality. It makes it more choppy, it's less supple. But this, I'm thinking, again, the weight and the length of the vehicle are working against that wheel size, so you don't really see a degradation in the ride quality of the vehicle. Then there's the steering. Now this, it's exactly what we'd expect from the S Class, but you kind of do feel the extra size of the vehicle, and I would argue that comes across as a better weight of steering. There's actually better feedback here because it's trying to move or turn a larger vehicle. And that's something that really we have to focus on. Let's come to the stop sign here. It's not really about the feel of the steering in a Maybach. Really, it is that four-wheel steering. Now, please don't try this at home. There is nobody around. Look at this, 133-inch wheelbase, and I am literally turning on a dime as if this thing was like a Honda Civic or really a smart car. That's one of the party tricks of these vehicles. By having the two different versions of four-wheel steer in both the S580 as well as this Maybach, it makes it usable around town, and really that's what these things are going to be doing every day. They're not going to be going around canyon roads. They're going to live in fancy neighborhoods like this. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game, Mind the Options game, with today's contestant. Something, if I'm honest, lowers my blood pressure when I drive it. This literally sucks the aggressive New York driver out of me, and frankly, I do not care what time I get to my destination. And this time capsule is otherwise known as a 2022 Mercedes Maybach S580 for a base price of $184,900. So peace in your life, it doesn't come cheap. Then there's the color. And here there's a couple of ways to access it. You don't just pay for the paint. You have to pay for the opportunity to get a two-tone car to the tune of $12,750. Then you get to choose the upper and lower choice of paint, and that could be anything. So you could swap it. There's not like a fixed menu from Mercedes. So in this case, Kalahari beige or gold with black on the bottom, and that costs an additional $1,750. Then the silver aluminum fanned walnut trim that is open pore. It's not just the dash, it's the backs of the seats. It is magnificent, especially with the lighting throughout the car. Really stands out. I'd say well worth $3,200. Then this literally has been thrown everything, including the kitchen sink, in the form of a refrigerator or a cool box, $1,150. Then to work in conjunction with that cool box, champagne flutes are fitted to this car. They're not cheap, $3,200. They store in here, but something tells me the folks at Mercedes and Maybach, they don't trust Kumo and I, so this car didn't have the champagne flutes in the cool box. So he and I stopped at his version of Smith & Wollensky and picked up some American champagne. Then we press on to the manufacturer leather package. This, I think really this is why it just calms me down. It's not just the leather on the seats, it's the leather literally from top to bottom. The headliner, not suede, not faux suede, it is real leather. It has stitching throughout the entire headliner. I'm kind of torn whether I'd want that to be contrast stitch or like they've done here. Something tells me it might be too much and too busy and take your eye off the road, but it would be pretty cool to see. And then there is leather on the frames of the seats. Now we saw that in the Porsche Panamera, the executive model. That was an option on the Porsche, but this leaves the Porsche in the dust because the seam, it's like it magically comes together. You do not see any of this stitching here. I'd say kind of a bargain at $8,000. Then the e-active body control. I mean, come on, we're already at over 200 grand, so why not throw another $6,500 so you don't disturb the occupants in the back of the car. Then the electric comfort doors in the rear. So that means this thing here, I pull this, or I can use the screen up front and I can open and close the door. Kind of a party trick, I'd say. This falls under the heading of, you remember the Butters episode where he became a pimp and he literally wearing a mink and he was dragging it on the floor. That's kind of what Butters would do. in the back seat of this vehicle. Then we press on to the 21-inch Maybach Executive Champagne Flute wheels. So that's kind of the theme, this whole champagne thing, but you shouldn't be drinking and driving. 21 inches, $1,300. Actually, that's kind of a bargain. Then the executive rear seat package. That's kind of what I'm sitting here. This is like the business class seats from an airplane. And it's not just the seats, it's the headrest, it's the pillow here, and that works in conjunction with its own HVAC system that's hidden in the console. Then the only other thing we add is the destination and handling von Sindelfingen, Deutschland, which is where the W223 S Class is made, for $1,050, which brings us to a total retail price of, I'm actually kind of surprised it's not more, $231,100. So I will admit, I was a bit slow to understanding the concept of creating a full-fledged Maybach out of a box standard S580. To me, there wasn't enough differentiation, at least on paper. But now that I've spent some time behind the wheel of this, I kind of get it. This, it is all about the details. This is the most finest thing that an S-Class can be. It's not an understatement, because an S-Class is already good. This takes it to another level. And there's something that I gotta get to right away, the stand-up hood ornament. Call me old-fashioned, call me a freak about this kind of stuff, but if I'm looking for this type of thing, I want the stand-up hood ornament. And this, maybe I wouldn't want the chrome strip running the length of the hood. That's a bit much, that's a bit garish. But the stand-up hood ornament, it just adds so much to the visceral experience of this being a Maybach. So if you are a longtime viewer of this show, you will not be surprised to learn that an equation like this, not my brand of cigar, but even though it's very different than what you and I usually drive together, thoroughly enjoyed this experience. Why? Because it is way more than the sum of all those small, detail-oriented parts. I said in the W223 S Class episode that was the reinvention of elegance. This takes it to a completely different level, which brings us to the wish list. And here, now that I understand this more, I firmly believe Mercedes completely missing the boat on a huge opportunity, and you kind of know where I'm going with this, those screens. The kind of folks who are going to write a check for this, they don't buy Teslas. They're not really screen people. They want something that's more like a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce that has all of those details that reinforce this is a very expensive luxury car. Those screens don't do that, and they're missing an opportunity. And I would argue the opportunity is not so much for competition, it is separating the S-Class away from the Maybach more, and I would argue the Maybach would sell better with a more traditional dashboard, something that has knobs, toggle switches, something more aviation inspired. Because the reality of the situation is, it ain't a cheap car. What do we say? This is 70 grand more than an S-Class. So you know what? Throw an extra 5 grand on top of the base price. People here, they don't care. They just want something that's different. They are definitely not price sensitive, so do the right thing on the inside. That is just my piece here, and this is the point of the episode where I turn this around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoMan TV, all one word, MotoMan TV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And with that, I do want to share something a little bit behind the scenes. One of the engineers for Mercedes, he actually is a neighbor of mine. I live in the South Bay of Los Angeles. He lives in the next town over. So I see him running on the Strand frequently, but I also see him driving test cars. And while I had this, he had, I believe it was the S660, which is the coming V12, and it wasn't two-tone. It was this beautiful dark blue metallic with the same color interior, and it had that satin chrome finish in the front. It was killer. We need to drive that. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.